It seems that 2024 was a funny season in general for chilli and vegetable growers in general in the UK, mainly due to the weather. Smaller crops than expected, later crops than expected. But that said, I made a few mistakes, and I'd like to spend a few minutes with you now talking about the biggest mistakes I made in 2024 and what I'm going to do about them in 2025. Let's dive straight in. The first mistake I made was that I started my season too late in the year. In 2024 I didn't start planting until April. Chillies have a short season in the UK and need as much time as possible to grow, flower, fruit and ripen, particularly if you're growing super hots. I think due to my late start I'd done no planning of the varieties that I wanted to grow, so even late into the season I was staggering my planting, buying additional plants, picking different varieties to try, so I ended up with all sorts of plants at different stages of maturity fairly late into the season. I think the knock-on effect of this was, as I just said, late germinating plants, many that never reached maturity, and those that did had much smaller crops than expected. In fact, things were running so late, it's now almost the end of November 2024 and I've still got 3 plants indoors producing fruit. And I don't mean ripening, I mean actually flowering and producing fruit, so way too late. They're never going to be viable. It just shows the knock-on effect. For the 2025 season, I'm already planning and in the process of choosing the chilli varieties that I want to plant. Making sure that I have all the propagators and lights that I want ready to go when I need them, and not to mention building the new greenhouse. I think if you look over my shoulder you can probably see the greenhouse door here, waiting to be put up when this storm that we're having currently passes. Everything feels a lot more in control than it did last season, and of course with another year's experience under my belt things should get off to a much better start. The second mistake I made was that I didn't buy my seeds from a reputable specialist source. I think I highly recommend buying seeds from a specialist, but due to the late start last year I didn't give buying seeds much thought and bought from a local nursery, and basically the varieties that they had in stock rather than any specific varieties that I wanted to grow. The germination rate from those nursery seeds was around 50, maybe 60%, but the jalapenos that I tried to grow had no germination whatsoever, so a complete failure on that front. Hopefully that'll be different this year. The seeds that I did buy later on in the season from a specialist provider had 100% germination rate. Now, while this is not the fault of the nursery, and there are probably other contributing factors, I think given the many thousands of packets of seeds that nurseries stock and sell, there really is no way of telling what conditions the seeds are kept in or how they're treated between the grower and the supplier and the shop floor, or indeed actually how viable they are. My seeds for 2025 have all been bought from 3 UK chilli seed suppliers. Chilli Chump, who I'm sure you're all aware of, go and check out his YouTube channel if you haven't already seen it. Red Dragon Seeds, and while I've not used their seeds before, I've only seen and read good things about them on the interwebs. And finally from South Devon Chilli Farm, whose seeds I had 100% germination rate with last season. I was growing some sweet banana peppers with those guys. They came out really nicely. I've certainly overbought for this year. I'll have to give careful consideration to what I actually plant and in what quantities, but I'll be posting a video about that in due course, so stay tuned for that one. Mistake number 3 was that I didn't give my seeds and seedlings the greatest germination and growing conditions. I thought I made a good effort with last year and the resources that I had, but given the overall results of my season, apparently my effort wasn't that great. Germination requires an ideal soil temperature of 28 degrees centigrade for chillies, and not knowing this I bought a non-thermostatic heated propagator, and it was only ever going to heat the soil to around 18 degrees centigrade. I learned that in the real world this was only ever really going to be able to raise temperatures about 8 degrees above ambient anyway. For the record, this is also true of thermostatically controlled propagators. But having the propagator placed on my shed, it was always going to lead to wild fluctuations in temperature, and the 28 degrees soil temperature was very unlikely to be reached. It's actually a wonder anything germinated, really. I think the reason why some of the seeds that I planted latterly reached 100% germination rate was maybe down to the warmer ambient temperatures, because I was planting later in the season. Who knows? I mean, once germination occurs, obviously the young seedlings need light, and growing in a shed in seed trays in their first pots with one east-facing window in a building was not going to produce enough light for them. After a few weeks, watching the seedlings get leggy and constantly rotating the seed trays to face the seedlings towards the light, I decided to install some of my own grow lights. Not wanting to spend money, I built my own by connecting together some old square bathroom lights and fixing them to a plank of wood so that I could hang them above the young plants. This did seem to have some success with growth, now at least going upwards, albeit the leggy damage already being done. I'm sure this setup would also not have passed many health and safety regulations or checks, and probably a bit risky given the use of mains electricity and metal shelves. It is what it is, and it served a purpose for that year, but we're moving on. I did run a desk fan over the seedlings and the young plants intermittently to try and toughen them up a little, but in reality I think they were too young for it to really have been worth it. I should have let them grow a little bit more before I fired the fans up. I think the final major mistake that I made, or fourth and final major mistake that I made, was that I didn't pot on at the correct time or into the correct size pots. I made a right mess of my potting this year actually, potting on early initially and then not potting on soon enough later in the season. I think it's common chilli lore to pot on from the seed tray into smaller pots once the first set of true leaves appear. And you can see that while I did this, I really didn't let the seedlings get big enough before doing so. And once I'd done it, I was also then taking those seed trays with the seedlings outside to get some sun and to aid with hardening up. A lot of this was, with hindsight, I think way too early in the plant life cycle, and as a direct result of starting the season too late, something that I'm going to try and avoid again this year. I'll be honest, I really didn't understand the importance of pot size and started seeing buds in the smaller pots first. And I presume this was due to the plants becoming root bound and assuming they were not going to be able to grow any further. This prompted potting onto 3 litre pots around June and final pots at the end of July. Again, way too late really to expect any reasonable sized crops at all. I think due to the lateness of the potting on, my local nursery also really didn't have a great selection of pots available, so I had to buy what stock I had. Again, this year I'll plan ahead and buy those pots well ahead of time, probably online, so I know what I'm going to be potting up to and when I'm going to be doing it. The plants I selected to go into the biggest pots just kept growing and didn't produce. They were happy, saw no reason to flower and fruit, I guess. Those in the smaller plots, and I'm sorry I've got no idea what they were with respect to litre size, did flower and fruit, and the assumption again is that they became root bound and decided they needed to get on with reproducing themselves. It's those plants that I've now got indoors and that are still doing their thing. Next season I'm going to put on first time when the seedlings are more mature and put on quicker into the final pots. The hope that I have some decent sized pots with a decent crop of fruit. I'm planning to grow some ornamental varieties, and I will keep those smaller by using 5 litre pots as a maximum size. I'll also make sure that I have enough pots and know what sizes they are way ahead of time. Square pots are also going to be a thing. I've got my greenhouse, they're going to take up less room in the greenhouse, I hope. I'm really hoping that investment into equipment, greenhouse and last year's experiences will help me produce a final better crop this year. It can't be a lot worse, to be honest. I mean, that said, it wasn't all bad. Cheese stuffed sweet banana chilies and frigatellos during the September barbecue were very, very nice. And granted, they might not have been perfectly right, but they were tasty enough. And also enough devil brew chilies to kind of dehydrate and make a few chili con carnes with. So that was nice. Now, in conclusion, I really think the biggest lessons I learnt from last year were to start my crops early, nurture my seedlings properly. Here in the UK, as I've said, we have a short outside summer season, so when summer finally comes, the plants need to be ready to go. If you got this far and you'd like to follow my journey in 2025, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss anything, because I'd love to have you along from the trip. And actually, if anybody's got any help or advice they'd love to give, I would be really, really pleased to hear it. All that said, until next time, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.